How many of you work in government in some capacity right now? Raise your hands. Okay. How many of you want to volunteer or work in government in some capacity in the next coming years? All right. That's a good number. Any other pop questions that we have from the panel right now? No? All right. So when I was working in government, I did a South by Southwest session called In Code We Trust. This is back in 2010, and it was like an opening day session, and it helped convince the South by Southwest organizers that they needed to create a government panel, kind of like a government track. And so I take the words "in code we trust" a little comically, because you can't always trust software code, and we all know that the legal code itself is written for a lot of flexibility, ambiguity, and sometimes persecution. So in code we trust is a little bit of a jest. But the people that we have on this panel are no joke. These are some of the most remarkable people that we are fortunate to have as our neighbors here in New York, not only in New York City, but also in New York State. I'm Noel Hidalgo. I think you've heard me talk way too much today. We're joined by Martha Norrick, the Chief Analytics Officer, Gabe Paley, the Assistant Secretary for Technology, the Governor's Office, Rodgers, the Talent and Community Manager at U.S. Digital Response, and Abbey Coase, board member from the Technologists for Public Good. And do I get to announce that you're also Okay, she also works for the state. I'm really excited that we get to have these people up here to help us talk about how we can use our skills to respond in this moment. With that, I'm going to pass the microphone off to Martha to give us a really brief what's your most inspiring session that you saw today, and we're going to go right down the line before they get into the sessions, descriptions, and coming up here to the podium.
It's a hard question. It's like choosing your favorite child. But I only have one kid, so I don't have that problem. But I went to the session by the folks who work on FloodNet, which is the sensor network that helps to measure sort of the distance between the sensor and the ground, basically. And so when the floodwaters rise, they can see it happen sort of live. And they had a session last year as well, and it's amazing to see how much progress has been made. And I'm also really excited by it because one thing that we always look for in our work is opportunities to understand like reporting behaviors of citizens, like who's calling 311 about stuff that's wrong and who's not calling 311 about stuff that's wrong, and having data where you have some sort of like more objective measurement of something that's happening to be like, oh yeah, there was definitely standing water at this intersection, and like, did anybody call 311 about it? I think some really interesting potential there.
I don't have as good of an answer. I unfortunately was only able to get here about an hour ago because I was working for most of the day. But I have been to this conference many times before, and I always love the MTA Open Data sessions. I know there was one today as well. And on my way here, I used the Weekendist app, which is built off of MTA Open Data, which really helps my day-to-day always. So,
hi, everybody. My favorite session was actually the one just before this one about housing affordability. Fascinating as someone who lives in New York. It was spectacular. It was also very informative, historically wise, and also how we can be empowered and the resources that we have as tenants and residents. It was spectacular. Thanks, y'all.
The session that I loved the most was from the folks at Just Fix. They have been working on Who Owns What for years, which I have used so many times. But they're partnering with Housing for Justice on a new service that is not public yet, so I won't put it on blast. But I think sometimes, in terms of data specifically, it's so tempting to want to be a vacuum cleaner to suck up as much as humanly possible. And what was so satisfying was to hear about how the team had been very intentional about pulling data that already existed, specifically to reduce the burden on people who would be using the new service.
Great. Thank you for that. I'm going to go back and watch all the recordings. This is the fun part. After all of this is done, I get to watch all of these presentations, and so I'll put those on the higher queue. That being said, it is an understatement that we are here under challenging times, and after a decade of advocacy, many of us were fortunate enough to be exposed to really amazing digital service delivery teams in the federal government and in the state and in the city. And now we're looking at a situation where there is no federal digital service delivery teams, and we are stuck with having to figure out how to build a solidarity network across city and state so that way digital service delivery, as the senator mentioned this morning, the service delivery that's coming at the state level or at the local level is the last stop of government services. So this is a recruitment panel. What we're going to talk about today is figuring out how to get you and your friends, your colleagues, wherever you are, whether you're working day jobs, underemployed, or if you're looking to transition, to take up that mantle and to go work for government. And so I'm going to ask Martha Norrick to come up and talk a little bit about NYC Analytics, and she's going to explain how you can participate with NYC Analytics and also some other jobs that gave her a foundational start in the work that she does with civic analytics.
Thank you, Noel. Thank you. All right. You can see that I awkwardly cropped the slide out, and that there's now this funny little line, which is actually a great way to segue into our office and what we do. So, as Noel said, my name is Martha Norrick. I'm the city's chief analytics officer. I run the Office of Data Analytics that was created back in 2012 during the Bloomberg administration. We were added to the city charter in 2018, so we are an office that exists beyond executive order. If you're a government nerd, there's basically a couple different ways that you can have an office in the city of New York. You could be an agency and be in the sort of official city charter. You can be an office that is created by executive order, which basically means that the mayor wrote something down that says there shall be an office of blah, blah, blah. And those offices exist so long as those executive orders persist. But then there's this special class of offices that have been added to the charter, and that includes the Mayor's Office of Operations, the Mayor's Office of Information Privacy, as well as the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics. When Mayor Adams became the mayor, he moved our office from being mayor's office into the Office of Technology and Innovation, along with the Office of Information Privacy, and New York City Cyber Command as well. So we're all now sort of in this umbrella organization called the Office of Technology and Innovation, along with the agency formerly known as Do It, one of the all-time great government acronyms. Our team does a few different things. We and I've been the city's chief analytics officer since 2021. So actually, since the previous administration, the end of the previous administration. We have sort of three main things that we do. We have a small but mighty team of data scientists who work on scoped analytics projects with city agencies and at the behest of City Hall or at the behest of legislation. We stick to kind of scoped analytics projects because we're not really staffed to be like the long-time institutional support for offices or agencies. And most agencies in the city have really amazing data and analytics talent in them to work on sort of internal operations questions and many of them are here today. You've probably met some of them. They're doing incredible stuff. I also went to an amazing session about analyzing the city's canopy, like tree canopy with the Parks Department and the New York Nature Conservancy. So there's all sorts of amazing stuff that's happening in agencies, and we kind of exist as this like extra consulting or like SWAT team resource that can come in and help somebody figure out something, especially when it involves integrating data across multiple agencies. And that's kind of where, the perch of like, we don't belong to any particular agency, but we are a resource for everyone to use and to share. We support agencies on general data analytics methodology, strategy, all sorts of different questions. We can help agencies out with that. We have a project library of public information about some of the projects that we've done over time. Definitely encourage you to check that out if that's interesting. The other areas that our office, the obvious thing that our office does is also run the New York City Open Data Portal, the Open Data Program. And Zachary Fader in the back just slunk in, who's the Open Data Program Manager. And in that work, we work with, again, every agency in the city to make sure that their data is made publicly available and accessible via the New York City Open Data Portal. And we also plan public engagement efforts around open data. And finally, we have a small but mighty and growing data governance and data engineering team. I like to describe the work of that team as sort of like making the data pool a nicer place to swim in. The city is big. There's almost 300,000 municipal employees. That's like the size of global Starbucks. It's a huge organization. And there's lots of data all across the city. And for lots of different reasons, there's not sort of just like one database where all of the city's data sits. And so for people to use each other's data, for people to be able to understand what data the city is collecting and what's an appropriate usage of that data, what's permissible with the various different regulatory regimes that city data is subject to, all of that requires really diligent work to document the city's data, to make it easy to integrate data when there's a reason to do so. Whether that's, geocoding or standardizing fields. It's like the least sexy topic, but very critically important for making sure that city data can be used by all. I think that's my 5 minutes, so I'm going to hand it over to the next panelist.
Hello, everybody. My name is Gabe Paley. I work in the governor's office. I just want to say it's meaningful for me to be here. I've been coming to this conference since like 2017, and it definitely is a big part of my journey into working in government. So thank you, Noel, for everything you do for this community. This is a lot. State government I have not always seen at these conferences represented. So my role as the Assistant Secretary for Technology, what that means is I advise on the state's use of software and technology to deliver services to people. I also assist with oversight of the state's IT agency. Martha mentioned OTI. We have something called ITS, the Office of Information Technology Services. The state government delivers a lot of services to people in New York, 3,000 plus, I believe. Everything from federally funded programs like unemployment benefits, SNAP, the nutritional assistance programs for women, infants, and children, Medicaid, to things like hunting licenses, fishing licenses. There's like an enormous number of programs that the state administers, many of which run obviously on software applications. We have over 1,000 software applications that people use to apply for those programs, and that a lot of government staff use to administer those programs. The state's IT agency is about 4,000 people. A lot of the software development work that happens to support, maintain, develop a lot of those software applications happens in that agency. In the last couple years, we've really been pushing for what we're calling the customer experience, or CX agenda. This is essentially a push to make those software applications, make the services that we deliver to people more easy to use and more user-centered. There was a push in the 2023 Governor's State of the State Address and Policy Book that I had a chance to work on, in which we announced that we're committed to making government more customer-centered. We proposed a series of initiatives. We identified a number of pilot projects and kind of made this an official priority of the state government. I think this is really important to Governor Hochul. She actually, earlier in her career as the Erie County Clerk in Western New York, oversaw a DMV, and I think really ingrained in her the notion that a lot of people's trust in their political leaders, their experiences of government, comes down to their experience of the services they receive. When you go to the DMV and you have a frustrating experience, or when you try to apply for a government benefit program and it's difficult, that impacts the way you think about your government. So we really want to make it a priority of this administration to work on this. Also, there are a number of pieces of the agenda. One of the things the governor cares a ton about is affordability in New York City. we know there are a lot of assistance programs that are difficult to access, and that fewer people than we would hope for are taking advantage of those programs because the websites are hard to navigate. And we have the data on that, we have the metrics, we know those are outcomes that we want to be pushing for, so we made this an official priority of the state government. Part of that also was appointing the state's first ever chief customer experience officer, actually the first state level chief customer experience officer in the country, to lead that agenda, because this is a very cross-functional kind of statewide initiative. And so we created this position. It reports directly to the role that is director of state operations, who oversees the state government. That's filled by Catherine Garcia, who some of you may remember was a mayoral candidate a couple years ago. It also had come up through a very operational upbringing in New York City government, also really has been an incredible advocate for this work. And the job of the chief, we call it the CXO, is to really kind of bring this type of culture to state government, work with the many state agencies that deliver services to set goals, measure things like how long does it take for someone to get through this application, what % of people who are actually taking advantage of this program, and set attainable targets for those agencies. Some of this has to do with technology, some of it has to do with very complex language on websites that people can't understand, or regulations that are hard to kind of like get through. So there's a piece of this agenda that is working with program leaders to kind of address some of these areas of complexity. And of course, there is a piece of this that has to do with technology. If those of you who work in government tech that know that there's very old infrastructure, I use the word mainframe much more than I thought I ever would. But when we kind of do these types of modernization projects to move on to modern infrastructure, we want to ensure that we're not just kind of improving the way the tech works, we're also aligning that with actual outcomes for people. And that's a big part of the CXO's role as well. We've done some initial projects over the last couple years. Some of you may be familiar with the IRS Direct File program that launched for the first time a year ago. This was the federal government's approach to essentially building a way to file taxes for free with the government. New York State was one of the first handful of states to participate in that last year. And we partnered with the federal government. We actually did this in partnership with Code for America. And this was one of our attempts to make it easier to interact with the government. What we found was about 85% of people who filled this out in its first year were able to do it in under 15 minutes, file their state taxes in under 15 minutes. And we received comments like this one. I finished this and I was like, wait, I'm done. That was so easy. It felt like what filing state taxes should be like. And it's not just about saving money, it's so much less of a stressful thing. And that's really the goal that we're trying to get to in the work that we're doing in state government, is like, this really is a psychological, emotional cost for people when they try to go through these services. It's important for us to try to alleviate that cost. We, in the last number of months, have launched a broader strategy across a number of the state agencies. I should also acknowledge that Abbey, on our panel, in the last 2 weeks has joined the customer experience team in the governor's office. We're very excited to have her. So, we launched a website, experience.ny.gov, if you want to see more about the kind of overarching strategy. But we're really trying to help across the state agencies implement things like web accessibility guidelines, help them understand what are the human-centered design methods, how can they be writing their websites in more plain language so people can more easily access them. So we've written guidebooks and playbooks on this website that we're starting to use with our agencies. And we've also really been investing in the teams that deliver this work. So we have a few teams that have actually been in state government for really the better part of 10 to 15 years. They've historically been based in Albany. In the last couple of years, we've been opening offices and recruiting into New York City as well. And they advise on implementation of a lot of the strategy. They ensure that the websites are more easily accessible, are easy to understand. They've been redesigning some of these websites. We've made usability testing and user research a major priority. This is an image from last year where one of our design teams actually took a letter that is sent by our tax agency to 400,000 people a year and just tried to watch people make sense of this letter. And what we found was that there were a lot of places where they were getting tripped up. There was a QR code that their phones were having difficulty scanning. We want, not like groundbreaking stuff if you've worked in the tech industry, but not always so commonly done in government. So we're starting to really try to employ these types of methodologies more frequently. And I mentioned modernization efforts, that we have a lot of underway. again, we want to ensure that as we're like modernizing technology infrastructure, we're also aligning that with experience outcomes. So this was the outcome of a workshop that our team did with one of our state agencies, where we're ensuring, as we go through this multi-year process to kind of get them onto new infrastructure, we're ensuring that we're meeting these types of goals and measuring our progress towards these goals as well. And we're hiring. So our state IT agency, if all goes well with the state budget process, which is currently underway, is going to have 300 openings over the coming year. And so everything from C-level technology leadership roles to product management, accessibility is a huge focus for us this year. We're going to be growing a team in that area. Cybersecurity, we likely will have over 100 jobs in cybersecurity. If that's something you work on, definitely stay in touch. Data, UX design, content strategy. The roles are 50-50 hybrid, telecommuting, and again, based in either New York City or Albany. If you're interested, we do have some current openings. There's a link here, bit.ly/NYS Digital Service, and we also just have a resume drop here we kind of threw together quickly, but if you want to just kind of stay in touch, you can go to that second link there as well. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Hi. I'm Jai Rodgers. I am the Talent Community Manager with US Digital Response. I wrote some notes down because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. Our organization actually supports offices like my fellow panelists, so I wanted to make sure that you all left with a good chunk of knowledge about what our mission is, how our volunteers support that mission, and what impact looks like on the volunteer level. So at USDR, we have a community of volunteers where our mission is to build technology capacity in government offices and agencies, right? So our approach here, we were founded in March of 2020, so happy 5 years to us, as a response to the COVID crisis. And so that actually built some of our mantras of delivering in days instead of months. And we also have another mantra, which is demos, not memos, right? We design for sustainability and usability. Our volunteers are not going to be with our government partners after a tool is developed or implemented beyond a certain point. And unlike states and cities like the New York offices, not all teams have techies on staff, so how are we leveraging the tools and their knowledge to build their capacity and so that the progress doesn't stop when the project ends? Again, it's all about building capacity and growing knowledge. Another one of our mantras is teaching them how to fish. So how are we taking the tools that they already use? How are we taking the knowledge that they already have, bringing in volunteers that make it more, not necessarily robust, but more efficient, more user-friendly, keeping the end user in mind, and pushing whatever the needle is forward, establishing the needs, scoping those needs, having that project be delivered, and being able to numerically and from a data framework, like what was the impact there? Let me make sure I'm not missing anything. Cool, so I wanted to share some notes around our volunteer placement because it's not apples to apples in terms of scoping needs, the team needs, what the functional needs are, or even just the flexibility of a team. These are some models that we use that kind of determine what an optimal volunteer would be. And we place based on need, not necessarily who the volunteer is. And so it can be a little competitive, I'm not gonna lie. The volunteers love what they do. And it's a really amazing time to be supporting state and local governments right now, especially from the technology perspective. And so we have folks who are with the functions of content strategy, UX design, UX researchers, the whole gamut. We now have a talent arm, so folks who have recruitment and people ops ability, they come in and they might help a government partner level set and leverage what they already have internally. I want to go over really quickly a project and case study that we were able to deliver as a team. This is really where my notes will come in handy. 1 second. So our partner at this point was the Council of State Governments, and they had a challenge because they were trying to implement a system to oversee licensure compacts. I want to do a quick level set of who would know what a compact is. Raise your hand if you know what a compact is. Ish, okay, ish. Okay, so usually states go by their own rules when it comes to licensed professionals, let's say nurses, doctors, contractors, that sort of thing. But if somebody wants to work across state lines or work in different states, they are trying to develop a program and a system that would allow folks to work across state lines without starting completely over. The problem here, though, specifically, is it wasn't just for one compact. They were for multiple compacts with different states. And the system needed to function well enough for all of these stakeholders and nuances. If they were to build something from scratch, it would take years to implement, and it would also take a crazy amount of funding. And so they called USDR to help with this procurement and technology challenge. Let's see. Again, my notes. Yes, so we were brought in, as you can see here, we trained folks on staff. We were able to do coding reviews. We did user research sprints. And what the outcome was is that volunteers conducted there was a mix of product managers, engineers, researchers from USDR that worked side by side with CSG. They helped elevate and their needs and train stakeholders. They draft procurement documents for ongoing work beyond that point, and then coached new staff on how they were able to use that system. Again, our volunteers, there is a beginning and end to the projects, and so how are we leveraging our time with them and training them up to be able to use those systems beyond our work. These are often people who are not trained in some of these systems, and so our solutions are usually low to no code solutions. And if you were ever curious about where your skills can be made impactful in real time, this is one of those examples. These were not hypothetical strategy decks. These were real conversations. These were real coding reviews. These were real coding solutions. And as you can see on the side, these are kind of our practices that were used specifically for this project. Let's see, yeah, so the impact there was that professionals were getting licensed faster, state boards were working more efficiently, and CSG had the confidence and the technology skills to implement beyond the project. And the best part is that volunteers made this possible. There are several motivations that people have to volunteer. Sometimes they are just curious, they're civic-minded, they want to do good in the world. And some people want to actually make that full-time investment and full-time transition into public interest tech. And so a lot of people volunteer to get to know what's on the other side, and not hypothetically, but in real world and in real-time practice. So this is an unshameless plug, I will say. This is a QR code. If you are interested in volunteering, there's a form, we call them hand raisers. If you want to raise your hand to volunteer, the form is on this link. We also are adamant and diligent about sharing resources for jobs within the ecosystem, and sometimes that is in government offices, sometimes those are other ecosystem organizations, nonprofits, private vendors. There are many different ways that tech skills are used to leverage and impact government solutions. So we are committed to that on that end as well. So if you want to volunteer, you want to stay connected, here we are. Again, my name is Jai. I'm with USDR. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Abbey, and I am a board member at Technologists for the Public Good. And I want to start by talking a little bit about myself, which, like, if you know me in real life, is a personal hobby. So I'm from Youngstown, Ohio. Oh, really? Find me afterwards. So it's big steel town, big Rust Belt town. I am a first-generation traditional college student. Both my parents were adult learners. I am the first generation of my family not to work on the line. I have like family members on disability from Walmart, right? I am not the kind of person who you would expect to be appointed as the Deputy Chief Customer Experience Officer for the state of New York, but as of 2 weeks ago, I am. And it's been wonderful. So the reason I bring this up is because, especially until recently, it's been really difficult to break into public interest tech. This hasn't been intentional, but it has been a side effect of it being a small, weird, evolving industry that hired a lot of its friends and didn't do the work that was necessary to make it easy for people to transition into the field, whether they were new graduates, new learners, or people who were coming from completely different careers. And that's one of the reasons that Technologists for the Public Good exists. We are the professional organization for public interest technology, and our specific tagline is, we are powering the people who are reimagining how the government serves the public. And that is really intentionally broad. I know that this is a panel for joining government. We have so many roles coming up, and especially at the state. But TPG exists because there is a vast bevy of humans who want to be involved in this kind of work, who may not have the time and space to get a government job, who may not have a ton of time to volunteer, who may just be trying to figure out, like I was, how to get out of yogurt PR and get into something that mattered more to me. And so TPG is a collection of humans that exists to support anybody who is connected with public interest technology. And the way you become part of that community is by wanting to be somebody who is part of public interest technology. So let me talk a little bit about what we do. We have been around for a few years. Recently, we have hired our first 2 staff members. We're a 501c6, so we're not for profit, but we sort of are able to do advocacy on our members' behalf. And this started, it was much smaller, and it was really because the people in this insular community were experiencing burnout. They recognized that it wasn't an equitable space, that the people who were there were not representative of people in America or people we were serving in general, and we had to do better. So after a lot of work and donations and thought and effort, especially from Riley Martin, our incredible executive director, Mark Lerner, we're now doing really meaningful work across a lot of areas. We're talking about finding the right jobs, building the right network, and finding the right leads and mentors. And right means what's right for you, right? So we do a ton of community engagement. That's in person, that's online. We have a huge and active forum where we're bringing together people to have these conversations. Some of it's really advanced, high level, senior leadership, cool conversations. Some of it is very much, would you like to have one free drink ticket and learn about what this is? We do conferences and convenings, especially a lot more this year as we have grown and moved to more of a membership model. We are sponsoring things we've never sponsored before, like the State of GovTech is coming up this summer. We're co-sponsoring an event in DC, a big formal professional event, and it's really cool for us to be able to build that reputation and that space for ourselves, to start showing up differently, to get more people able to see the work that we're doing. Coaching and mentoring has been huge for us. There is definitely a huge chunk of people who are senior enough to have the time and space and desire to offer mentorships, to want to be the people that they maybe didn't necessarily have as they were coming into the industry. And likewise, we have huge cohorts of people who are transitioning in, who want to learn how to do this work. And our coaching, our mentoring programs have been absolutely incredible. They are leading to people getting jobs. They are leading to people getting the kinds of jobs that they want. They are leading to people being in the spaces that they want to be in. Advocacy, obviously, we're advocating for policies. This is a newer area for us. It's the C6 part of the C6. But we're trying to move to a space where we've got an informed view, and we're not advocating on anybody's behalf, but we're representing what we hear from our membership and what people want to hear broadcast more broadly. Research and publications, we do a workforce survey. It helps us understand things like what people are experiencing. Their work-life balance is good, their burnout is terrible. Some of these things are a little bit, we knew them already, but it's the first time anybody's been able to put numbers to it and then get it published in State Scoop. Get it into people's sort of areas of understanding beyond anecdotal. And then courses and training, this has especially been huge post layoffs, post changes in federal structure. We're teaching people how to do private sector resumes. We're teaching people what opportunities are available. So in our numbers, we have nearly 1,000, nearly doesn't look good on a slide, nearly 1,000 members from 39 states, and 80% of our engagement is community-led, which means it's not the people on the board, it's not the people who are getting paid, it's the people in the community who are doing the work. And here's just a little look at some things that we have coming up. And what's cool is it's a mix of in-person and online. It's a mix of things from organizations that like Aspen, sort of people who are kind of notable in this space, and just Data and Donuts getting together to learn. So I'll close out with this really fantastic quote. This organization has been an invaluable part of my personal and professional growth. It's what helped me land my first government role as a technical project manager for my city. And if you'd like to join us, we're at publicgood.tech.
Great, thank you. Do we have the other microphone out here? Yeah, great. And do we have another one? No, just the two. Okay, instead of going to some of the structured questions, do you guys have questions? You guys and gals and individuals out there have questions? You have raised hands. Let me just see if you have a question for the panel, raise your hand so that way I'm going to gauge what we do next. No. No. Wow. Oh, I'm sorry. That hand wasn't high enough, and I'm short. No, that's okay. So I just want to clarify. I am one of those 1,000 peoples on TPG. I am a paid member. Anybody else a paid member up here? Okay, great, excellent. So we look forward to having both of you. Yeah, and thanks for using the shout out to Data and Donuts. Our friends in LA. Our friends in LA inspired us to do Beta Bagels, which was a speaker series inside of One Center Street, which is the municipal building. Data and Donuts is a really fun view of LA's public interest tech community. If you have a question from the audience, please use the microphone that's in front of you. Please raise your hand high so that way I can see it, and then I can call on you. Please speak clearly. And I'm going to look at the interpreter to see whether or not they got it. And if they did, then we're going to go. So, mic on?
Hello? Okay, great. Ill-formed, and part of why I didn't want to jump in fast, but I'm thinking about, for people transferring careers or or maybe early career, and just if you can speak to how to get into government positions, which feels like there's a lot of, the qualifications are very strict, as opposed to the tech startup space, where if you know somebody, you have space to grow and learn. And so I'm curious, what are the growth opportunities and how to get your foot in the door?
I will start on the New York City side. There are sort of two tracks in government for joining the government. You can join as a civil servant, which requires that you take the civil service exam, a civil service exam. There are many different civil service exams. You might want to take a couple of them. And then when you, after you take the test, you will be put on a list that is sort of I don't know, like an adult nightmare of like how well you did on a test is going to be on the open data portal for anyone to see. So if you'd like to see how I did on the civil service exam, for example, you can look that up, or any other government employee that holds a permanent civil service title, just to add to my nightmares. Agencies, when they have an opening for that, and they want to hire somebody that has that sort of set of qualifications, each civil service title has its sort of set of requirements or things that they're looking for. So it might require that you have a degree in a particular field, or that you have so many years of experience, or some combination of those things. So that's something to definitely keep an eye on when you are crafting a resume or applying for a government job, is to really check those qualifications. They can sometimes be interpreted generously, especially when it comes to work experience. If you've had internships, if you've had volunteer work or things like that, it doesn't strictly have to be exactly like I have been employed from here to there. But you should make sure that you're getting as close as you possibly can to meeting those qualifications. Because there is a step where they're going to basically see, like, would you pass muster as this civil, into the civil service title? Do you have the education and experience that's required to be able to be eligible for this civil service title? You take the test, you get on this embarrassing public list, amazing government transparency public list, and then you, when agencies have an opening in that title, they will call people off the list in order of how well you did on the test. Again, literal nightmare. But the and you might have the possibility to be called by multiple agencies at the same time. It's a very I'm not a professional historian of the civil service by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a fascinating thing, and definitely worth reading more about. When Bloomberg was the mayor, he didn't like the civils. I'm sort of like, this is my understanding of the situation. I was not there. My understanding was that he was not terribly fond of the system, and so he just didn't offer any tests when he was the mayor. So everybody in the government for a while was a provisional employee. And then there was a lawsuit, and then they had to start offering civil service tests again. So that's one way. The other way is to be a political appointee. And if you have a lot of the folks that are sort of in higher ranking jobs in the government are sometimes there sort of, for a season. They come in with that particular elected official. They're there, they serve at the pleasure of that elected official. That elected official can fire them whenever, hire that position. They have sort of some more autonomy basically over those positions. And there are a smattering of lower level, non sort of permanent civil service titles as well, that are open titles. Community coordinator is one of them. If you ever see a job that's listed as a community coordinator, that means that you don't have to take a test for that one. But there are fewer of those, and that's by design. They want to protect sort of the integrity of the civil service system. And, for the most part, city jobs are governed by that civil service system. It is confusing. It is hard to understand from the outside. I think my number one tip is, if you are reading a job posting that you think is interesting for the city, try to get in touch with somebody in the office, try to get in touch with the hiring manager, and try to and see what the sort of civil service deal is with that job, because it can vary. And again, it's a system that has some room for interpretation in terms of experience and things like that. And it's worth kind of trying to really understand that. And if you are a permanent civil servant, the idea is you are a government employee, sort of regardless of the way that the wind blows, when it comes to who is the top elected official in the government.
I would add, so at the state level especially, there are other paths. There are some exemptions to the civil service system that very eloquently described. For example, there's a kind of a universe of titles that you can apply to in government. And for some of those titles, you can make the case, for cybersecurity as an example, that this is a really hard skill to test for. We're going to call this, maybe we're going to recruit for this outside of the examination process, and that goes through a process. The Civil Service Commission will kind of approve that. A lot of the jobs actually at the IT agency now are outside of the examination process. So they're what's called non-competitive. Also, in the past 2 years, there was such a large volume of job openings at the state level that we initiated a program for a number of different titles, including a number of more entry-level IT titles that go outside of the civil service examination. That's called the HELPS program. So there's like, if you're like a nurse, for example, and during the pandemic, we needed a lot of those. We couldn't necessarily wait for the examination process to go through. So there are ways outside of the examination process to get hired as well.
Same on the city front too. IT has the most sort of flexibility with civil service titles, I think, of any of the sort of categories of civil service titles.
I will add really quickly to federally, the standards are incredibly strict, and you can kind of use them to your benefit. So I tend to think about private sector resumes as being qualitative data and public sector resumes as being quantitative data, right? You can take as much time and space as you want to write out every single one of those things. The danger zone is, like, you can never say, if they're looking for Microsoft Word and Excel and PowerPoint, if you say Office, you're not going to get the job. Like, there's no flexibility there. Sometimes, and I would not strictly advocate this for everything, but you can copy and paste the requirements and then just paste that in, and those are your skills and expertise. And sometimes HR is like, thank you, because that's rarely where the decision is being made. That's the door opening to having a conversation with somebody who would actually choose to hire you. But yeah, the system is designed to be as objective as possible, and because of that, it can kind of be worked.
A lot of times that what I've seen is the language barrier. And so when folks are curious about transitioning full-time into government roles, I always advise, as they have all started talking on, is learning the language that is being used in hiring in government. And so before using your own time to apply, you could be wasting it because you are not understanding what the role requirements are fully. And so there are a lot of resources out there in terms of dictionaries around how what words mean on a posting, or what things like non-competitive job roles are. So I usually advise people to start with the language of those roles and those postings. That would just be the thesis of that, is just around language, to be honest. There is a language barrier completely.
All right. When my mom retired from the military, she had to, actually from civil service, she had to give her resume, and she ended up like almost pretty much using a whole ream of paper. This was like 50 years of service, a whole ream of paper, which was her resume of like every single position. It was impressive. Yes.
I just wanted to know, in terms of, because I've come from the private sector, there's Q1, Q2, Q3, and I would assume, but assuming that it's based on political years, or is it, how do you calculate wins? And in terms of chronological, is it project-based? Is it yearly based? Is there, because I know government tends to be slower. It might not be, but it tends to be slower, it seems like. So sort of speak to that, if that makes sense.
In terms of hiring, or in terms of sort of like the...
Oh, how to be like a best employee, to like, when you get the job, how to be an asset for your team, or like speaking like that.
I want to say quickly, this is actually one of my favorite things about government, is that people become their agencies, and people who are attracted to a certain kind of agency then work at that agency.
Is that like how people end up
yeah.
looking like their dogs?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So like the Forest Service talks in seasons. The way they think about their work is seasonal. I think a lot of times, isn't that so cool? If you are, I was at 18F, right? And we really thought about it in terms of 8-week and then 12-week sprints. We thought about everything in terms of sprints. If you can follow sort of seasonally what's happening with your agency, so the Department of Labor is probably going to be harder to get a job with in January because unemployment claims are highest in January, right? Like, understand that that is a collection of nerds about that particular issue, and that will set you up to be as successful as possible to understand the world they're in.
More questions? I'm doing your job for you now, sorry.
Well, thank you.
I was holding the microphone.
Me, right? Okay. So, thank you to all the panelists first. As a student, I wanted to know what you guys would suggest as somebody who's into research. What do you guys suggest that I should do, especially over the summer? Because, that's a long break, and I want to be able to use that to go from, like, being just a learner to somebody who's, like, also applying what they learned. So I wanted to know what you guys suggest that I should do.
I would suggest that you use the New York City Open Data Portal to think of a research question about your neighborhood or about the government that you would like to answer, and then assuming that your research is quantitative in nature. But we also have, I think all of our offices probably have pretty great internship programs where if you want to spend a summer learning about the government and having, I don't know, extremely lovely, spending the beautiful summer days inside fluorescently lit public sector offices, we offer that opportunity.
I mean, depending on what type of research, but we also have internships in fields like user research. So for our design team that works in IT agency, that's a team that's just focused on ensuring that the products that we develop are meeting the needs of the people who are going to use those products. And we are looking for interns who can help ensure that that's happening and interview people and do that type of qualitative research especially. So check it out.
Hi, I'm coming from the private sector. I'm an IT support analyst, and I'm trying to figure out how I can differentiate myself between people who are coming from federal now, from the stuff that's been going on, and also people that are like, say, internal hires from other agencies applying for, say, the agency I'm going for, or whatnot like that.
With 5 minutes, where's the other question that was over here?
It's actually kind of similar. What's trending in government technology right now?
Yeah. What's trending in government technology? This is a thing called AI. I don't know if you've heard about this. It's funny. I think that the topics I was discussing, customer experience and human-centered design, are actually becoming more and more like things that many of us are familiar with. If you've worked in the private sector, are starting to be more and more discussed in state government. I mean, I will say that a lot of people are thinking about what are the use cases of AI in government and what are the ways that we can use AI ethically and safely and responsibly, and trying to find that balance. So, I mean, there are teams in New York State that are starting to really think about that, and meeting with agencies, we've created an interagency task force to kind of look into the types of use cases where we can apply AI where it would be actually helpful to people. So, I mean, I'd be remiss not to say that as a trend in government right now.
I think to your question about differentiating yourself as someone coming from the private sector, I think people who come from the private sector have great. It is always nice to have sort of fresh perspectives and an outsider's view of what things are, how things are done, and how processes and things like that. Although I think sometimes I would counsel you to have a healthy respect for sort of why things, or just maybe a healthy curiosity about why things are the way they are in government. I think that I think anybody who comes into a place from the outside, if I were to go into a private sector company or you were to come into government, you kind of look at things and you're like, well, that's silly. Like, why are they doing it that way? We could do it a better way. And you probably can. But there's also probably a reason why it is the way it is. And I think, differentiating yourself, whether from wherever you're coming from, private sector, federal, state, city, having that kind of healthy curiosity and willingness to really to see things, to be able to see things clearly, but also extend some grace to the history of why things are the way they are, is something that I always really appreciate with folks who are joining the government from the private sector.
So 2 things. Before I was with USDR, I was with another organization called Tech Talent Project, and we would help build executive slates for teams in government. and we would test on EQ and TQ. And coming from the private sector, one of the indicators of a high EQ was around leading with curiosity, which is also one of the community oaths for USDR and our volunteers. Also, it was relinquishing yourself of the savior complex of like coming into a team saying like, oh, everything y'all do is stupid. We did it better at Apple. Like, you have to go in and know what the framework and what some of those guardrails are for why they have to do the things that they do. And in terms of differentiating yourself from the federal folks who were laid off, honestly, the one up I will say that they have is that they are connected within the ecosystem, and not saying that it's equitable by any means, but you are doing the work right now, being connected with each other and being able to network with folks in and out of government. And so I would really encourage leveraging that, especially as you're learning what is on the other side, talking to people who are in government. Again, leading with curiosity, asking what their challenges are. I think that will help, and you will still have that framework of speed, maybe outside in the private sector, but you will now say, I'm civic-minded and I understand what it means to be civic-minded, and just leading with that, your own curiosity about how you can be of service, not how you can come in and change it.
And with that, can you hear me? Yes? With that, I want to say thank you very much. We are in a unique opportunity. I don't think any of us, our elders have really been in a situation like this where technology is advancing at a state that is really unprecedented. We're seeing the types of technology enter into our pockets and into government in a way that seems almost unvalidated and unverified. And we have a unique opportunity to be that firewall to make sure that technology adoption inside of our local governments, inside of our state government, is done in an ethical and an appropriate way. We are a community standing together to making sure that all of these tools serve all of us, not just the few of us. And so I really appreciate the four of you coming together at the last minute to make this panel, to give us an opportunity to talk to the rest of the community of how we can put our talents and intellect, our diversity, our specialness into government service, and hopefully be the firewall over the next few years. So please give them and our sign interpreters a huge round of applause for all their amazing work.